Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's session in the Exploring Your Identity Abroad series. We'll be sharing the recording, as I mentioned earlier, that we'll be doing for this session and the slides with all registrants so you have continued access to the information shared today. Since today's session is meant to serve as a resource for you, please feel free to add questions to the chat and we'll work hard to respond to them at the end of our presentation. In this session, we plan to dive into the stories and unique experiences of Asian American, and Asian diaspora students as they engage with global learning. And yeah, as we all know, or hopefully we all know, there's many different identities within the Asian diaspora community that are complex and shaped by different diverse histories, cultural backgrounds, and personal journeys. And they, of course, differ widely based on the person's heritage, their family history, or where they grew up. Today, we'll be using the term Asian diaspora to describe communities of people with Asian ancestry who live outside of Asia. This term encompasses a broad spectrum of individuals, each with their own experiences. And just wanted to explain, why we're using that term. We're hoping to try to encompass as many identities as we can. And yeah, as we share the student stories that we'll be going over today, we invite you to reflect on your own personal identity and how it can be both challenged and enriched when studying broader way, and thinking about how your own cultural background and self-identity might influence your experience as you explore the world. And yeah. So today's presentation is part of the UC system-wide Exploring Your Identity Abroad series. We'll be offering upcoming sessions in April, so please check out the link on the screen. And the goal of the series is to spotlight the different experiences and opportunities and challenges that might arise based on your own identity in a global context. And before we continue with our session, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the original stewards of at least the land that I am on today. Many of us on the call, or at least a few of us on the call, may be currently in Santa Cruz or have visited Santa Cruz. And that space occupies the unceded territory of the Ama Mutsun tribal band. And we encourage folks to learn more about the land on which they occupy at nativeland.ca. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to start introducing ourselves. My name is Glynis Kincaid. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as a global learning advisor at UC Santa Cruz. My role is to support students throughout their global learning journeys, so from the start of even thinking about study abroad or away all the way to returning to the US and reentry. I had the opportunity to study abroad in high school during a summer in France. I went there specifically to do two different language schools in Paris and Nice, France, and I was able to participate in a homestay program while I was there. It helped me explore my identity in a new context and challenged me to think critically about my place in the world, and that was a lot to do with the French language that I was learning and improving. And then in addition to studying abroad, I've been able to travel to several countries across the world. There's many more on my list that I have yet to reach that I hope to in the future. But each of these experiences have been very different based on my different experiences and identities that you can see on the screen here. And there's been different challenges and successes that I've navigated in those spaces. On the screen, I've shared a little bit about my own identity, and I hope that helps give context to my perspective as we talk today. And yeah, as we go through the session, hopefully we'll continue to explore how our own personal identities continue to shape us as mine have for my time abroad. Next, I will pass it off to my colleague, Wilane.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wilene Carr. I'm a UCEAP academic specialist for Dominican Republic, Japan, Mexico, and Taiwan. So my role is basically helping students through their UCEAP study list and making sure your courses and credits transfer to your UC transcript. I identify as Filipino American, cisgender and able-bodied. I spent the first 13 years of my life in the Philippines, and then because of that, because of learning about the Spanish culture and colonization, it made me interested to study abroad in Spain during my junior year at UC San Diego. The travel bug hit me after that, so I ended up teaching English in Korea after college. And yeah, it's me. I think same. I'll share more a little. I'll share a little bit about my experience throughout our presentation today as well. Thank you. Okay, and yes, today we are joined by our four lovely panelists whom we'll hear from throughout this presentation. To our panelists, please go ahead and share your name, your major, your class standing, and where you studied abroad. And let's start with Hannah. Is Hannah in the room?
Hannah might be joining later, so
Later. Okay, so we'll start with Kotaro. Kotaro, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kotaro, and I am a senior at UC Berkeley. I use he, him pronouns, and I study architecture and city planning. And I study once in Spain during summer and once during spring semester in Netherlands, both through UCEAP programs.
And next we have Wilson joining us.
Yeah, hello. My name is Wilson. I'm in my second year at UC Santa Cruz studying applied math. I studied in the UCSC Global Seminar. We went to southern Spain and Morocco for I think 4 weeks. Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you. And next is Kayla, last but not the least. Kayla, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kayla. I'm a third year that attends Berkeley. I major in legal studies, and I studied abroad in Singapore and in London.
Thank you so much.
everyone. Yeah, so we'll hear lots later and throughout the presentation from our awesome panelists. So thank you all so much for your time and energy in today's space. We want to take a look at what we'll plan to cover today. We're going to first discuss the benefits of participating in global learning, how to overcome specific barriers or perceived barriers such as finances, and then finish by discussing successes and challenges that our panelists have experienced in different cultural contexts and open it up to you all so you can ask questions directly to the panelists. I want to set the stage for our discussion today by sharing the most up-to-date data we have on global learning participation nationwide. Out of the students who studied abroad in the academic year 2022 to 2023, 9.6 identified as Asian, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander. I wasn't able to break that down into the identity that we're currently focusing on, which is Asian diaspora, but it encompasses all of those identities. Historically, Asian American students have participated in study abroad programs at increasing rates, but there, of course, are still barriers that impact representation, whether in certain regions of the world or in different fields of study. And we think it's important to understand the different trends to identify areas where maybe more support and outreach or just, examples of past experiences are, and also to build upon and celebrate the successes of students who have studied abroad. Next I want to pose the question, why should you participate in global learning anyway? We have on the screen a lot of different reasons that fall under 3 different buckets. So academic reasons, personal reasons, career benefits. Some of the examples are things like personal growth, learning a new language, developing new relationships, complementing your UC studies, career preparation, etc. A few we want to specifically highlight and that we think are really important is that global learning and unique about global learning is that it allows you to learn both inside and outside of the classroom. During my study abroad experience, I found myself learning way more outside of the classroom than I did inside of the classroom, although it was a good complement to have both. And so my outside experiences interacting with French culture in real time only continued to bring my academic studies to life in ways a traditional classroom setting really couldn't. Global learning also allows you to experience a new culture. When we stay in our own cultural bubble, we often aren't exposed to new ways of thinking and learning, which is, of course, really important as we engage with the world. Global learning also helps you clarify your own interests and your life goals. I had no idea that I would be working in international education after college. But if you look at my trajectory, you will see that I, had this experience in high school where I studied abroad, and then I somehow found myself being a peer advisor in our study abroad office. And then, after college, I had the opportunity to work in that said study abroad office as a staff member, and just kind of saw myself continue exploring in the field. And I think all of those little experiences really helped me get to that position I am today at UC Santa Cruz, and helped me realize that I love getting to talk about this with other students and see their successes and their own journeys. And yeah, we want to pass the question of why global learning to one of our own panelists. You can hear directly from a peer. So, Kotaro, we'd love to hear from you about why you decided to study abroad. If you could share a little bit about maybe some of the reasons and examples.
Yeah, absolutely. In my case, I think it's a little bit of mixture of everything in here. I study architecture, so I've been wanting to study or like look at the architectures in European countries. And one of my main interests was Spain. So I started from there and I study abroad there, get to see lots of places and get to travel around the country. So that was amazing. And then I started to think that I want to do another study abroad, maybe like a little longer. And that's why I decided to do my second study abroad in Netherlands. And there I was able to finish up my minor as well. So I did have a little bit of academic benefits as well. So as the career benefits, I finished my minor there. And meanwhile, I have one whole semester. So I was able to travel a lot during the weekends or before and after the semester starts and finishes. So that was an amazing experience.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's nice to hear that you had a couple different reasons that kind of all led you to studying where you did. Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay. But why should we participate in global learning as an Asian American or Asian diaspora student? There are several reasons. The first reason could be wanting to know more about our own roots or heritage. This is the reason why Anna studied in Hong Kong, which you can read here, and I'll go ahead and read it as well. Meeting extended family was the cultural homecoming that I had expected and wanted for my study abroad experience, and I remain grateful for that. But when my trip was over, I didn't feel any different or more Asian than when I started my journey. I was trying to fill the missing spots of my Asian identity that I deemed insufficient. No amount of Cantonese classes, Chinese food, or walking the streets of Hong Kong would ever be enough because my concept of what it meant to be Asian was flawed. My cultural identity isn't one or the other. It is both Asian and American. And finally, I understand. I am Asian enough exactly as I am. And the second reason is also knowing and exploring our own identity abroad. Camille studied in Paris, Hong Kong, and London, and she says, being in Paris made it hard for me to figure out my identity as a Chinese American in a new culture. I experienced what it was like to be an Americanized Chinese in France as I spoke perfect English and showed American friendliness while looking Chinese and practicing Chinese customs. Later in the program, I asked myself why I was adapting my own identity to fit the social norms of my surroundings. I realized that I didn't need to change myself according to my environment as I was still Chinese American, regardless of how I looked or acted. And I can definitely relate to that as well. A lot of when I studied abroad and when I taught English abroad, a lot of people had assumptions about my own identity, and it actually took some time for me to figure out that I am Filipino American. And last, representation matters. And the demographics of UC students studying at the UC now have changed, and so have our students studying abroad. And also, Fiona Lee, who studied in Bordeaux, France, shares, once I began befriending the other non-American international students in my class, there were a few people of color in my cohort, racism and sexism became easier to overcome. I made a tight-knit group of friends with Vietnamese girls who were living together as they studied at different institutions. They had been living in France before I arrived and taught me things like which Asian grocery stores were available and which were the cheapest. It was wonderful having community, and we cooked each of our own culture's foods for one another. We bonded over the cultural similarities, differences, and struggles. And once I found a community, I finally felt like I had a real life in France. So just a few words from our students, but now we're going to hear from one of our own, Kayla. Why did you decide to study abroad? Do any of these reasons resonate with you?
Yeah, so I feel like multiple are pretty relevant. I have to say, I initially wanted to study abroad because I grew up in the Bay Area and also go to school in Berkeley. So I wanted to explore a different culture and environment away from this area because I feel like I kind of grew up in a bubble. And initially, I always wanted to go to Asia because I have family roots in Taiwan, but the program that I was interested in didn't have a program there. So Singapore was the only country offered in Asia. So I chose that to explore my heritage as like a place where I can go visit home, but also learn more about other Asian cultures in that environment, especially because Singapore is really diverse. So it was both heritage speaking, but also exploring who I am abroad and what it means to be, I guess, Asian, but also Asian American. I think initially when people like would look at me, they would think I'm American when I'm in Singapore, but when I later studied in London, it was more of a like Asian um, take. So I think both experiences were more for personal growth and learning who I am away from home, because I was just used to that here. And then also, I think it was really interesting to find community. I really wanted to learn more about people who are in similar circumstances as me, but also different, and what it means to connect with people who are from different backgrounds. So in terms of representation, I also want to learn about other people who are maybe not as represented on campus or who I'm usually interacting with in the Bay Area.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, yes. Thanks everyone for the delays as I'm flipping through slides and transitioning between spotlighting. Thanks for your patience. Next, we're going to transition to exploring what we believe are some perceived barriers to global learning and how to overcome them. So the first barrier number one, and often the most common, is that most students feel they can't afford to study abroad or away. What we will say to that is that California itself is an expensive place to live. The cost of living here is, and I hate this next statement I'm about to say, I apologize everyone. The cost of living here is 40 to 50% higher than the national average, and housing is 3 times more expensive than other parts of the country, as I'm sure we all know and feel. And it might sound surprising, but you can actually save money, not in all cases, but in some cases, by studying abroad in a place where the cost of living is less than California. Moreover, all UC students going on a UC program can take their financial aid with them. Your financial aid, in many cases, on a UC program will adjust to meet your program cost. For example, if you receive 80% of your UC tuition and fees covered through financial aid, about 80% of your global learning cost will be covered by financial aid if your program takes place during the academic year. We encourage you to reach out to your financial aid offices to see if you can get an aid estimate. A lot of the offices these days are providing this before folks can apply, so you can get an estimate of your financial aid for the term you'll go abroad. There are also many scholarships that are specific to study abroad and away. And so with the right amount of research and support from your global learning offices, you can find funding opportunities to help offset the costs. Most scholarships have eligibility requirements that can range from you needing to be a Pell Grant recipient to studying abroad in a very specific program or location. There's also specific program types, like UCEAP has specific scholarships if you do a UCEAP program. And so we recommend connecting with your global learning offices to see what scholarships might be a good fit for you. And here's just a list of 10 lower cost study away locations that we've put together for you all. So if you want to maybe experience global learning without breaking the bank, these destinations offer more affordable living costs and still great experiences with lots of cultural immersion. And yeah, next we want to, is Hannah here? If not, I will see.
I do not see her yet.
That's okay. We're gonna get Hannah here, I think, at the end, so I'll keep going.
All right. The second barrier we hear about from our students is how studying abroad will delay time to graduation. Actually, four-year graduation rates for students who study away are significantly higher than those who stay at home, 17.8% higher. So when you study abroad through UC programs, you receive UC credit. And with careful research and planning, you can select a program with courses that can fulfill your major, minor, and/or GE breadth requirements. So one of the requirements for your study abroad application is actually an academic planning form, so that it ensures that you meet with your major and college advisors, so that you do not miss out on your time to degree. If you do not want to take courses abroad, there are also opportunities to do research, fieldwork, and internships instead. And now I have a question for one of our panelists, Wilson. Did your program delay or support your progress to degree?
Yeah, for me, I studied abroad in the past summer, and so it didn't really interfere with any of my academic plans and like coursework. So it kind of like varies, but I would say that the bullet points listed on the slide previously, I resonate with that. Definitely like come back with a sense of like a new like sense of like learning. Um, and for me, I took a GE course and it helped fulfill the GE over the summer. So overall, it did help me in my degree, yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay. The final barrier we want to touch on is folks feeling like their loved ones won't approve of them participating in global learning. I just had a conversation with a student this afternoon about this, so it is very timely. And it's completely understandable to worry about how your family or your loved ones might react to your desire to study abroad or away. For the student I talked to, we had a specific conversation about them being first gen. They're like, they don't know what it's like to study abroad. They didn't experience it in college. And so I don't have anyone to quickly shoot off ideas at for quick questions. And so they were apologizing for all the questions they were asking me. And I was like, no, that's literally why I am here. That's why my role exists, is for you to, whenever you need to, ask questions. So this is a very um, reasonable barrier that you might feel. So we recommend as a first step to provide clear, transparent information about the different financial aspects of the program to your loved ones. So that's the program cost. It's sharing the financial aid estimate if you've received one, any scholarships you're looking to apply to, hopefully a budget that you're going to start looking at for yourself, and showing that you thought about the financial impact and how you hope to manage it. Another major concern is always safety. So taking time to research health and safety in the host country, host location, sharing this with your loved ones, and sharing how we as the UC system and UC programs can support you on the program, especially with health and safety, is an important part of the conversation, so you can reassure them that you are prepared and informed. And it's important for loved ones to know why this isn't an experience that's beneficial for you. So you could focus on, maybe as an example, some of the professional advantages. So whether that's you building a global network, having increased employability, having earning a higher starting salary, or gaining entrance to grad school based on you having this on your resume. It can be an important argument so that loved ones can see the long-term value add of the experience. And of course, it's important when having this conversation to remain calm and informed and open, instead of arguing as though that can be the, go-to response. Having a thoughtful conversation where your loved ones feel heard and involved in the decision-making process is a big part of this. So allowing room for flexibility is important. And yeah, we would love to hear now from one of our amazing panelists. Kotaro, I'd love to hear from your perspective what it was like to share your interest in studying abroad with your loved ones and how they responded, and maybe how you addressed any hesitations or worries that you might have had before you went.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my biggest struggle was to kind of like explain to them that the study abroad doesn't affect any of my academic plan. Because one of the biggest concerns that my parents showed me was that they're worried that by studying abroad, I might have to extend my graduation, or it might take a little bit longer to do everything, or maybe the quality of the class might be a little bit different from Berkeley. So those are the stuff that I was able to answer by doing like more thorough researches. And also there's also a concern of like safety. So those are another thing. I feel like maybe talking to your major advisor or talking to the peer advisor and ask as much question and then clarify every concern before you study abroad, so that you'll be able to understand yourself and then help your parents or loved one understand how like study abroad might be possible.
Thanks so much, Kotaro.
Thank you. And next, we should also consider how our current identity or perception of ourselves would likely be when we go abroad. So first, although you may identify as Asian, Asian American, or of the Asian diaspora, you may be seen more as an American while you are abroad. Even if you have intersectional identities, people may associate you more with being more outspoken, being direct, independent, and individualistic, American values more than your cultural identity. Second, you may also get the question of where are you really from, which is a question that I got a lot throughout my time abroad and throughout my travels. And this video actually notes that this question comes from a place of curiosity and not from malintent. But we can also feel that it's a form of racial microaggression that makes us feel perpetually foreign. When you answer this question, for example, it can perpetuate more questions than it actually answers. For example, if I say I am Filipino American, it usually leads to questions like, well, what does that really mean? Did you grow up in the Philippines? Did you live here when you're an adult? What does that really mean? But we have heard from students that it's productive to be prepared with an answer to this question when you go abroad. And from my experiences abroad, I actually learned now to answer this question with I am Filipino American. This means that I was born and raised in the Philippines, but I've lived in the US for many years. And now I'd like to ask one of our panelists, Kayla. I want to ask you if this came up for you during your study abroad program.
Yeah, for me, I personally was asked this more in London when I was there rather than Singapore. A lot of people asked where I was from, and when I explained that I was from the US or from California, they would ask like, "Oh, but where's your family from?" or where are you really from? And then sometimes I got questions like, "Oh, where did you learn English?" So I think there's a lot of misconceptions of what it actually means to be like Asian American and to grow up like in America. So even though I had those questions, it can be like a little bit offensive at first. I feel like it is a good like educational opportunity, and it does come from someone that's curious and really wants to know. So it's not like they're trying to insult.
Thank you. Oh, Hannah just joined us. I see her, Glynis. I'll admit her. Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Okay, last few slides, and then we'll get into the Q&A. This slide's just talking about how marginalization also shifts in different cultural contexts. So many of the more than 300,000 students who go abroad hold the privilege of a US passport or attending college in the US. And it can feel jarring and maybe make you feel guilty for having this privilege compared to others in your host community. And in some countries, there are still barriers to higher education, specifically related to gender and gender inequality. In other countries, because you may have access to the US dollar, that can come with its own economic privilege. So, in countries where the US dollar is stronger than their currency, that can also be a shift in privilege. And if you're going to a location with a lower cost of living than California, you'll find that the host local's economic accessibility is different. Even if back in the US you identify as low income, you might see that shift as well. And finally, want to touch base on racism and discrimination abroad, as they can be major concerns for students. And this can take many forms in your host community. And we've listed just a few examples of how race may come into play abroad, but it's definitely not an exhaustive list, and we're just touching on it briefly. So just know. Often students may face questions about their identity or their appearance that reflect ignorance or stereotyping. Some students have said that in some locations they have been identified as belonging to another marginalized racial group that they do not belong to. So being, for example, assuming that, are you sure you're not, insert race or ethnicity because you look, insert race or ethnicity to me. These comments can feel uncomfortable and invalidating. And we want to validate that is an experience that could happen. Some students, particularly female presenting folks, may experience fetishization. I need to practice that word, or objectification based on cultural stereotypes. So one example is we pulled from a real experience was an Asian diaspora woman who was studying abroad in France and realized through talking with others that the experiences that this person was having was really related to the hypersexualization of Asian women in Europe and European culture. So they kind of pieced that together by talking about their experiences that they had while studying in France. Students might also experience language discrimination. So this may be more prevalent in locations where you're perceived as part of the host majority. So for example, a student who identified as Chinese American was studying abroad in China, but was questioned for not speaking Chinese and then host locals assumed that they were a local. So that felt led to feelings of exclusion and misunderstanding surrounding their cultural identity. And racial isolation can occur. Apologies. Racial isolation can occur when students are the only Asian diaspora person in their program. So in this example, we have a student who's reflecting on being shocked by being the only Asian American in their program, especially when they have a strong Asian American community back home. I think a lot of us in the Bay Area can relate to it, being quite shocking being in countries where there's not representation that we're used to back home. And finally, there are other more overt forms of racism and discrimination, such as microaggressions, harassment, and discrimination based on different intersections of your identity, whether that's gender, sexuality, or ability. And a little bit of a harsh pivot to Q&A, but we're really hoping to have you all ask questions. Feel free to I guess I'll let you go, Elaine. This is your slide.
Yeah, no worries. So this is the most exciting part. It's your chance to ask the panelists any questions you have about their experiences, insight, or any advice about studying and learning abroad. We do have a few questions we've come up with because we know sometimes it's a little intimidating, but we want to give you an opportunity. So if you want to go ahead and type your question in the chat, or we have someone who raised their hand.
Oh, and maybe we could introduce Hannah really quick.
Oh
and
yes,
let
I'm
Hannah
sorry,
say
I
hey.
forgot. Hannah, are you in the room?
Yeah, I'm right here. Hello, I'm Hannah. I am a fourth-year economics and accounting major at UC Santa Barbara, and I studied abroad at Yonsei University in Seoul, South Korea over spring 2024.
Great, thank you.
I
Welcome.
wanted to
Thanks
get
for joining.
your awesome photos on the screen, so I just had to do that really quickly. Okay.
Okay, I think we got our first question in the chat from Emily. It says, how much in advance do you plan and apply if you want to study abroad? Does any one of our panelists can answer that?
I can answer first. For me personally, my program was in the summer, so the applications open in December. So I kind of planned ahead, I would say like 6 months before, but I know for some programs they open about a year in advance. So you might need to plan like a year ahead depending on when you plan to study abroad, but it really depends on each program. But I would say usually plan like at least 6 to 12 months ahead.
Great, thank you. And I verified that information is correct. There are some programs where it is at least a year in advance. There may be some programs. So that's definitely something you want to have a conversation with your campus study abroad office, or on the UCEAP website. There is also an application timeline there and how to apply. Sorry, I'm trying to get my video to start again. There it is. Okay. And then we have another question that came through from Tabitha. It says, I'm hoping to apply for some scholarships in order to study abroad. Do any of you have any tips for writing essays for those scholarships?
Yeah, did anyone apply to any scholarships? Did anyone receive any on our awesome panel? It's okay if the answer is no, they're competitive.
Yeah, I can speak a little about that. I applied for the Gaucho Scholarship, which was kind of a scholarship specific to students at my university. And like when writing the essay to apply for that, I think it's really important to just kind of be genuine about why you would like to go abroad, plus what you're hoping to gain from your experience. I am an economics major, so I talked about how I want to gain a new perspective of my major in a new country, because I took an economics course in South Korea. And I also spoke about my interest in maybe learning more about the professional workforce while abroad, since I did an internship.
Great points.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of options for scholarships. UCEAP, like we said, has some specific ones. Your campus might have very specific campus, as Hannah said, campus scholarships that are helpful. And then if you're a Pell Grant recipient, you can apply for the Gilman Scholarship, which is through the US Department of State. And there's one if you are traveling to East or Southeast Asia called Freeman Asia, which we always recommend if that happens to be your, where your program is. And there's something called the Fund for Education Abroad, which I really like to highlight, which is looking at financial need, but they also give preference to students of color, first-gen students, and students with community college backgrounds. So I think it's a really good one as well to apply to. And they have a range of, I think it's could be up to $10,000 if you get the max for that one. That's a great question. It looks like Welaine, you put in the chat the link to the UCEAP scholarships.
Yeah, and also that the campus study abroad offices may also have scholarships listed on their respective websites. And I think I see the chat. How do you find these scholarships? So I linked that on the chat there. Can you also do them while you're abroad? Glynis, you may be better poised to answer this question. I think most scholarships are prior.
Prior, yeah. I haven't heard of any that you can do when you're already on your program. That would be more of maybe a campus funding source. So you could reach out to your major department or your college to see if they have any funding or scholarship that you could still apply to. But a lot of the larger national or California-based ones are in advance of participation. So it'll be about a year, sometimes less, that you'll have to apply in advance. So the Fund for Education Abroad just closed in early February, and it was for summer fall academic year 2025-26. Sorry, the academic year was 2025-26.
Yeah.
The summer and fall was just for summer, fall 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of advanced planning that has to happen, but that's a good question. We can always explain that as well if you reach out to your global learning office. We can give you the deadlines.
All right. And Emily has a great question for everyone. By the time you returned from your study abroad trip, how did your view of the US change in positive or negative aspects? And any one of our panelists can answer, whoever would like to answer that.
I can go for this one. I personally feel like there's like small things that I appreciated from like somewhere else. So for example, in Singapore, I just really liked how cheap the food was, or like how they didn't cook as often. Most of it was eating out, and it was very easy to use the transportation. Whereas in the US, I feel like it's a little bit harder. So I feel like there was some culture shock there. But then I feel like also being abroad made me appreciate what it means to like be back home, and like I guess things that are familiar to me that I kind of took for granted when I was abroad. So yeah, I feel like there's definitely positives of things that I wish like could also be here, but then also like realizing that there's things in the US that are also and like valuable in itself.
Yeah, I think it's that transition can be hard. We try to do on my campus, we try to do a reentry session for alumni because it is such a dramatic shift when you get home, and trying to like expand how you feel about what you just left and where you are now, especially with so much going on in the world just generally is, yeah, it's an interesting transition. But thank you for sharing, Kayla. That's awesome. It looks like we have a question, two questions. First question I'll just start with is from Asher, is how did you sort out your health insurance while you're abroad? For example, who did you contact related to your health insurance? It's okay if we don't know, I can answer, but I'd love to hear from y'all.
I can try this one. So basically, UCEAP kind of helped me set up my health insurance for when I was in Korea because we were required to have like both an American insurance plus an insurance for in South Korea. So will likely be like a pre-departure orientation prior to leaving to your program, where they'll kind of like review everything you'll need to know for your specific country. And there's also maybe going to be a like study center for UCEAP in your host country, which will help contact you with all the resources you'll need while abroad.
That's great. Yeah, it's usually required that you keep if not in all cases, that you keep your domestic insurance, depending for most programs, at least for UC programs. So, and I don't think that's a program requirement. I think that's a US requirement.
A US
and
requirement.
yeah, and usually if it's a UC program, it's going to have insurance associated with health insurance included, travel insurance as we often call it. Do you want to take the next part of that question, Willie?
Yeah. Asher's second question is, did any of you all use student discount cards abroad, such as ISIC? Otherwise, how else can you save money abroad specifically as a student?
I can answer this one. For me, I personally didn't use any discount cards while abroad, but one way I saved money was by budgeting ahead. I'm sure like that might be like maybe common sense, but I think it really helps to budget out like how much you're willing to spend on like food or like other stuff like shopping. I think it really depends on what you want to prioritize. If you want to travel to other countries during your time abroad, you might find some discounts on flights as a student, but for like day-to-day expenses, as long as you, I think, know how much you want to spend while you're abroad and kind of plan it out, then that's a good way to maybe save on money so that you're not just spending on the spot without tracking your expenses.
Any other tips for saving money, ways to save money? It's interesting how in some places eating out is more expensive, but then it can be the opposite depending on where you are, which is really, as you said, Kayla. That's a big one.
Oh, great. Not a panelist, but I was able to use, we have a comment, sorry. I just started reading. It says, not a panelist, but I was able to use my student ID, even just a photo of it for some places like museums that had student discount. That is correct. A lot of places in the world, I think in Europe, actually, a lot of museums do accept student ID cards for discounts and or free admission. So that's something that you want to just look if there are any student discounts, like college, university student discounts. So great. Thank you, Isaac, for sharing that. Any other questions?
I would love to ask everyone, we'll see how if other questions pop in. So we'll stop if there are other questions. But I'd love to know what's one piece of advice that you wish that you had received before you went abroad. I know that's a big ask. So you all, if you don't have an answer, that's okay. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you all. What do you wish you knew before you went? Whether that's like before you applied or, once you got there, you were like, oh, I wish I knew this. I wish I brought this, that kind of thing.
I can share one of my funny failure story. One of the things I think is important is to like redo a little bit of research of how you're gonna get internet of the place you were gonna go. The first struggle I had when I went to Spain was that I heard from so many people that the credit card um will work fine in Spain, and it did work fine. But the thing is, like when I went there, when I first used my credit card, it was rejected because it was suspicious activity because I have never been to Spain. And then the only way you can unlock the card was to call the credit card company. So there, I pretty much didn't have access to any money for a minute. And since I hadn't planned anything about the internet, I had to ask someone around for a little bit of money so that I can get to my housing, and then like I had to figure out from there. So that was my first struggle. So I feel like those little tiny things, you wouldn't think is gonna be a problem. I think it's always good to do a little bit of research before you go.
Yeah, can I add something? Yeah, I was in another aspect, I feel like for me, I feel like learning like the language of where you're going, if it's relevant. For example, like I went to Morocco and Spain. I feel like if I were to like give myself advice, I would have told myself that honestly like learning a bit of Arabic or like yeah, especially for Morocco, Arabic or French, it honestly helps you connect with the culture more, like interact with the locals, whether like you're like negotiating something or just talking to someone on the side of the street. Just knowing like basic phrases too, I think it definitely helps. Like just make your experience more worthwhile a little too.
Thank you.
And you can be like me and have a little pocketbook that you never
Yeah.
use. I don't think the students do this anymore, but we
I know.
were told that we had to have it on us. It was like a pocketbook in case we like were in a situation where we didn't know how to respond. I'd been studying French for many years, but it still came in handy because there are things that you don't think you need to figure out how to say that you do in emergencies, or not an emergency, but in a funny situation. This is a good tip. Google Voice allows you to call US numbers from abroad over internet for free. That's great. So getting to a cafe or a restaurant where you're able to use their Wi-Fi could allow you to do that. We had a question about petitioning for course credit. I don't know if anyone had to do that during their program, whether it was for their major, minor, or GEs. I'm just wondering how that process went for you and if you have any tips. The student is getting conflicting information about whether they should start that process before they go or after they get back. I will say that at my university, every department has a different policy around when to start the petition process. And Elaine, you can speak to this too, because you're academic.
Yeah, it is. It has varied across different departments just because of all the changes from COVID. UCAP always recommends to do, if you can, a pre-approval, right? That's what the academic planning form, most campuses require that. But your department may also tell you like, okay, this is great, but there are no guarantees until we see your grade and your syllabus when you come back from abroad. So I think it's good to plan ahead, try to get a pre-approval, but if not, know that you just need to present evidence upon your return. So we usually tell students save your syllabi, your course materials, and all of that for the petition process. I hope that helps. If anybody else has anything to add from the student perspective, please do so. Okay. I think we have 2 more questions. I just want to make sure we capture everyone. The other one is, what was it like making friends and finding community on the trip as a minority? Was it required to come out of your shell if you're more introverted, considering you are in an unfamiliar country?
I can answer this. I personally am a little bit more introverted, so I do think I had to come out of my shell a bit. But when I was abroad, there was a lot of group activities for people who are also from my program, like home campus, that like we can connect with beforehand. So I think that was really helpful. And they were maybe a little bit more extroverted, or like being friends with them helped me meet other people that I don't think I would have just by following them along or going to their events. So I think that was really helpful. And I think for UCEAP, there's other students from the UC campuses too that you can meet. So you don't have to worry about just making like international friends. Like you'll also be traveling with other people who are in the same situation as you. So even if you do feel introverted, I feel like there are opportunities to get involved with your own comfort level.
Anything else or anybody else?
Yeah,
Want to add to that? Yeah.
yeah, I want to add something. Yeah, for me, in my program specifically, I was like the only Asian person. There was 20 people. And yeah, it was kind of like stressful. I'm also kind of introverted too. Um, and yeah, it's like a little bit scary, like not finding connection. But honestly, like what I realized that like all of us were American. We're all like the same age. And it wasn't really too difficult to connect. Once like I was like a week in and I knew everyone. And yeah, just being open in general. So yeah.
Yeah, I found that while studying abroad, everyone is really eager to find other people because they want like friends to explore the new country with and everything like that. So I think just when you first arrive to your host country, it'll be pretty easy to find other people like your age, also from like America or maybe even California, who are interested in like the same things that you are.
Thank you. We have about 4 minutes left, and I want to make sure we can address this last question here. Do you find that your discipline is standardized between the US and your study abroad country?
Yeah, I don't know if y'all specifically studied abroad with coursework in your major. If you did, maybe speak to if you saw any differences between the disciplines.
I can talk a little bit about this. I found that the classes or the style of the class is a little bit different depending on the country, and I had to change the way I take classes based on that as well. I feel like in Berkeley, it's like a little bit of mixture of discussion and lecture. versus the university I went to in Spain was very much discussion based and experience based. So I had to change my style a little bit. So I think, yeah, I think if anything, like maybe listening to maybe one or two people who went to the same country and then listen to their experience might help you before you go to, prepare yourself and get ready before you study.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're almost at the end, so we're gonna transition, I think, to closing up. And yeah, just thanks for those great questions. Let me do a quick removal of spotlights.
Thank you
the
for
slides
the
back
spotlight.
Thanks, everyone. Okay.
So here are some final tips and reminders as you prepare to go abroad. Research your host culture and the climate there, the culture, just how they respond to different things that we've discussed in this presentation. Connect with alumni or other peers to build a sense of community, just like some of our panelists have mentioned. You will likely meet a lot of them in your pre-departure orientations as well on your campus or through UCEAP. Be open and optimistic towards new experiences. And definitely, consult with your campus study abroad office to learn more and get connected to resources. And in the next slide, we actually have all of the campus resources so that you know that you're not alone on this journey, and many others have taken this path before you and will take this path with you. And here are a few campus identity resources that you can get connected to now. And then I think I'll hand it over to Glynis for our last two slides.
Okay, well, this is just an official thank you to everyone for joining and for the great conversations, and just so much thanks to our amazing panelists. Thanks so much for your time and your energy and for sharing your experiences. I learned a lot, and I hope the feeling is mutual from all those that attended. If you found this session valuable, please feel free to stay connected with us and explore other events in this series. We're here to support you throughout your global learning journey. And here's a QR code if you're able to download to see what the next sessions are. I think one is on women abroad, and then the other one is on heritage seeking, I believe. And they're both in April. So we have some great upcoming sessions. With that, I'll say thank you, and yeah, hope to hear from you all soon. Take care.
Take care, everyone. Safe travels.
Yay.